Good evening, everybody. I'm David Wendeleer, Director for Van Alen Institute, and I'm very happy you're all here tonight. We've been having a very busy week with lots of events, and this is one of the new event venues we're testing out, and I think it's a pretty good one. Over this past year and a half, we've been looking at issues of escape in a larger urban landscape under the title Elsewhere. And this week we do this very specifically, looking at New York City as a point of departure, but also as a destination. So we're looking at issues of immigration, people coming to the city for tourism reasons, and many other issues. So in this light, we're also looking at the evening tonight, but I'm not going to explain the evening. We have somebody much better for that, but I have the honors of doing the thank yous. So the thank yous for tonight, the Zolberg Institute on Migration and Mobility, who have been helping us here at the school tonight, and especially Patrick, thank you very much for all the work. Also WNYC and Archinect, our media partners in this event, and our sponsors, NISCA and the Department of Cultural Affairs. And then I'm very happy that these days Van Alen even has a proper leadership council chaired by Stefan Jaaklitz, Mark Gardner, Joel Sanders, and Susanna Serafman. And then on our team, we have two people who have been working very hard on this, Yelena Weiner, and very big welcome to Sarah Farwell, who's our program manager and has been pulling together all of these beautiful programs, and who will be doing the introductions tonight. Okay, Sarah.
Thanks so much for coming and welcome. Hi. Tonight, we have a series of musicians, authors, other performers, comics who are going to help us to explore the way that people come to the city and the way that people leave, the experience of coming and going, but really looking at some of the conditions that shape and the personal narratives that result from increased mobility and migration. Up first, we have Brian Lehrer and Joe Salvo. Brian Lehrer needs little introduction. He's the host of Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. And Joe Salvo, who is the director of the Population Division for the New York City Department of Planning. And his office is behind reports like New York's newest New Yorker series. It compiles comprehensive information on the foreign-born to policymakers, program planners, service providers, to help them gain perspective on a population that continues to reshape the city. So, I'd like you to join us for a little bit of conversation and trivia.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. And thank you, Sarah, and everybody for including us in this. I'm curious to see who's here tonight, and maybe some of you will be curious to know who else is in the audience. Who lives in Manhattan? Raise your hand. Okay, well represented. Who lives in Brooklyn? Whoa. And nobody cheered. Usually when I ask who lives in Brooklyn, you could do that in Omaha, and you'll get cheers. Yeah, Brooklyn. Whose ancestors came through Ellis Island? Whose ancestors came here as slaves? Anyone today? Anyone here come originally from the US? Yourself, but not New York City? Anyone from the Midwest? Good, you picked up on that cue from before. Anyone from the Mideast? All right. Or anywhere from outside the country? Originally. Aha. Joe, we're not quite replicating the city stats, but it's getting close. Pretty good, right? Of you who came from outside the country, how many of you came directly to New York when you moved to the United States? Not everybody. And not to New York if you came from outside the country? Right, okay, so most to New York. Any actual Native Americans, pre-Columbian heritage? Not maybe in this room, okay. All right, so let's go on to the true-false portion of our show. Between 2000 and 2010, true or false, more people moved out of New York City to elsewhere in the United States than moved here from elsewhere in the country. Got that? Raise your hand if you think this is true. Between 2000 and 2010, more people moved out of New York City to elsewhere in the United States than moved here from elsewhere in the country. How many think more people moved out? How many people think more people moved in? All right, so false, and the answer is?
More people moved out of New York City than came in from the rest of the country last decade. But those of you who answered otherwise, actually you're onto something. Because since 2010, we've had an increase in the number of people coming from the rest of the country, and I can see from the Midwest. And what's happened is that this big stream of people coming in, primarily young people, coming to experience New York, coming in to feel what New York City is like and establish their careers, they are injecting vitality into the city now to the point where our balance of people coming and going overall is almost zero, which hasn't happened in decades. In other words, we are growing, okay, as a city because the number of people who come and go are balancing out, and 65,000 more births than deaths occur in New York City every year. The city of New Rochelle has 67,000 people in Westchester County. We add that city to New York every year because of births over deaths.
Is that unusual in the United States?
It is unusual in the sense that we have several 100,000 people coming and going each year. I did some quick checking before I came here, and the number of people who come in and the number of people who leave, each direction, every year, 250,000 people come in and about 250,000 people leave. And then, in anticipation of the question I always get, why do people leave? The answer is, if people didn't leave, people couldn't come in, right?
So they do it as a public service? I don't think so.
But it's a demographic fact of sorts. And here's the interesting thing. It's healthy. It's good. Cities are supposed to be dense. Cities are supposed to have big streams of people who come and go. The cities that don't have that are the cities that are suffering right now. Okay? New York is doing very, very well in that regard. So those of you who said that our so-called domestic migration is getting more positive, actually you're onto something.
Who leaves? Demographically.
Well, demographically, about a quarter of the people who leave are foreign-born, 3/4 are native-born. They go all over the United States. The West Coast is very popular. And depending upon your ethnic origin, your racial and ethnic origin, you may go, if you're Hispanic, the tendency is to go to the South. For example, the Puerto Rican population loves Central Florida and moves there in large numbers. The African American population with origins in the South will go back to the South. Young people who leave for purposes of jobs will go to the West Coast heavily.
All right, true or false? These are in the correct order by population size. It's true only if this is the exact correct order by population size. Brooklyn, Queens, Houston, Manhattan, Philadelphia. Is this true? Brooklyn, Queens, Houston, Manhattan, Philadelphia. Is that a true order? Raise your hand if you think it's true. False?
It looks like about 50-50. It's true. It's true. 4 of our 5 boroughs are top 10 cities of the United States. New York City is over twice as large as LA, over 3 times as large as Chicago. But the Bronx is the 10th largest city in the United States by itself. So New York, when it comes to big, New York is it.
But not necessarily by metro area, right? So there's a kind of political subdivisions are different here than in LA, right?
Well, I'm talking about LA City. If you talk about LA County, which practically goes to the Nevada border, the fact is, yeah, it would be a bit different.
All right. True or false? There are twice as many immigrants living in New York City today than in 1970. Twice as many. True. True? Raise your hand. True? Yes, true.
Yes, true. In fact, the population in 1970 was only 18% foreign-born. Today it's 37%. We've gone from about 1.5 million to over 3 million foreign-born in the city. 3 million by itself. Think about that. That's bigger than Chicago.
So 37% of the city is foreign-born,
Yes.
was that the number?
Yeah.
Compared to 18% in 1970.
Yeah.
How about at the height of the Ellis Island era?
You have to go back to about 100 years, actually, to get a percentage like 41 was the percentage in 1920.
Wow.
You have to go back to 1850 to get into the 50% range. And you want to know why? Because all the immigrants who come in, they have children. 52% of the births in New York City are to foreign-born women, and all those children are native-born. So you have kind of this cap on the percent foreign-born. It can't rise too much because of immigrant births.
All right, the top 5 foreign-born New York City population groups, true or false, are, in this order, top 5 foreign-born New York City population groups are from China, India, Russia, and Brazil. True or false? China, India, Russia, and Brazil. True? False?
Ooh,
Oh,
good.
couldn't fool you on that one.
Fool you.
And reality is?
Number 1 is the Dominican Republic. Number 2 is China, followed by Mexico, Jamaica, and Guyana.
DR, China, Mexico, Jamaica. I've known this for a long time, but it still surprises, especially white New Yorkers, time and time again, to find out what kind of an ongoing, every year population inflow we have from the Dominican Republic since like 1965, right?
Yeah, but it's changing a bit. The Dominican Republic is now, like many groups, finding other places to live. And they're going across to New Jersey and other places. And right now, there are actually more Dominicans leaving the city than coming in. But because of their births, they continue to grow. China, on the other hand, is likely to be the largest immigrant group in the next few years because there's a steady flow from China and there's a substantial number of births in that population too.
True or false? Half of current New Yorkers do not speak English at home. Is it that many, is basically what I'm asking. Half of current New Yorkers do not speak English at home. True? False?
The trues have it. Half do not speak English, speak a language other than English at home. 1/4 of the population is limited English proficient. It's about 1.8 million people, and it doesn't change. Why? Because people are coming and going on a steady rate. And people ask me, well, when is everyone going to learn English? It's kind of a naive question. And I say, well, if you understand the ebb and flow of people, you'll know that one of the great challenges the city has is incorporating people into the fabric of the city. People learning English is part of that, but there's a steady flow of people from other countries. And those people who learn English pick up and go. New York it's a processes people, and they go out and do other things. All you need to do is travel the country or the world, and you'll always meet somebody from New York. It's no accident.
True or false? Because of all the immigrants, New York City will be slightly younger on average in 2040 than it is today. True, New York will be slightly younger on average in 2040 than it is today because of all the immigrants? Okay, false? Most people think it's true, Joe.
Oh boy, it's false.
Boy, is it false.
Yeah, New York City, like the rest of the country, is aging. The baby boom population is entering the retirement years, and it's causing the median age of the city's population to rise. But because of our immigration and because of this increase in migration from the rest of the country, we have a good situation here. Many places in the country have a demographic imbalance. You probably have read other countries, the population is aging and young people are not staying. Young people do not migrate in. And as a result, there's an imbalance, and that creates a problem for the delivery of services. In New York, we have a steady inflow of people, and that defines a great city, having that ebb and flow of people. And again, if people leave, it's okay. For people to leave. It's not evidence of problems, so to speak. It's only when people leave and no one comes in to replace them that you have a problem.
Are there any other cities in America that have a similar population profile to what we've been describing here today?
In terms of volume, certainly not. in terms of the ebb and flow of people and the volume of ebb and flow of people, not. There are great cities in the country. I mean, when you look at Los Angeles, you look at Chicago, you can look at Miami-Dade. These are places that are vital, Boston, vital. But the degree to which they take in people and people come and go, you don't see that in other cities to the degree you see it in New York. We have a combination of people, young people who want to come here, are what we call our domestic migrants from the rest of the country, and people who come here from the rest of the world. And that's what energizes us, and that's what makes us unique. But I'm not going to take anything away from San Francisco or Los Angeles or Miami. They too are fortunate enough to be the recipients of migrants and especially of immigrants.
This aging of the population, you have a chart that I saw that breaks it out by borough, and it's really stark. Want to talk about that?
Yeah, over half the population of the Bronx is Hispanic, especially now increasingly Dominican. Hispanic population tends to be much younger. So the Bronx will be the youngest borough going forward, will continue to be the youngest borough. Fertility is substantial in the borough. We have large numbers of Hispanic births. On the other hand, Staten Island has a profile which is more suburban in the sense that people who are forming families and who might otherwise migrate to the real suburbs outside of New York City instead migrate to Staten Island. They tend to be older. And Staten Island is getting more immigrants, but not to the degree that the other boroughs get immigrants.
And the immigration by country, DR, China, Mexico, and Jamaica. DR is the first, providing about 13% of our immigrants. China, about 11%, according to your stats. Then Mexico and Jamaica. And you have a category that is bigger than all four of those biggest combined, called other. Really?
Well, other is hard to describe because it involves dozens of countries. But just to give you some of the most interesting statistics that we have currently, in terms of the flow into the city, part of that other group is from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is now the third country in terms of the flow in to the city. The Arab population has hit 100,000 in New York City for the first time. We have groups that are going into different parts of the city that have never been there before. If you live in and around Jamaica and Queens, you'll see a growing South Asian population. If you live in Elmhurst or Jackson Heights, you will see increases. You'll see population from Bangladesh. You'll see the population from Eastern Europe, from the former Yugoslavia, moving in increasing numbers. If you're in the Bronx, you'll see a growing Albanian population. It is almost impossible to describe the configuration. You almost have to have a map of the city and say this neighborhood, this neighborhood, this neighborhood, because there are so many groups involved in that 44%.
Last question. How screwed are we in terms of housing stock?
Well, you know right now that we do population projections, and our population projection is 9.1 million for 2040. I'm sorry, 9 million for 2040. That is based on a calculation that we do of housing units. And we're projecting not only population, but we have to project the number of housing units required to house that population. Increasingly, we are trying, and this administration is trying to increase the number of affordable units. That is for people who are kind of in the middle of the income distribution, who don't have the supports that people who are below poverty have, and do not have the advantages that people on the higher end of the income spectrum have. So there's a concerted effort. There is a shortage of affordable housing. I mean, we know that, and it varies substantially by borough. But the fact of the matter is that we are trying, or the current administration is trying to address this problem. And you're going to certainly be hearing more about it next year, for sure.
Joe Salvo knows everything about everyone who has ever lived in New York, who ever will. Please thank Joe Salvo.